Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast. I know so many of you listening to this show love your local bar, your local restaurant, maybe your local hotel, and have so many fond memories of time in hospitality businesses. This is the podcast where we get to chat to the human beings behind the scenes of that industry. Maybe the chefs or the bakers or the coffee roasters or the gin distillers or the craft brewers or the entrepreneurs, but all doing an amazing job of making sure that hospitality stays interesting and the big, dull, formulaic brands do not take over our high street. Please enjoy the show. In this week's episode, I am talking to Tom Foot from the Open Air Dairy, and this was probably one of my favourite episodes to record, partly because I was stood in the middle of a beautiful Dorset field on a summer's day, surrounded by some 850 cows, making it an exceptionally memorable experience. Now, Tom Foot and Neil Grigg are far too humble to say this, but in building up their open air dairy, they've become true pioneers in their industry. Like many tenant farmers, they didn't have hundreds of thousands of pounds to build conventional sheds and modern indoor milking systems. So when a fantastic farm came their way, they had to think outside the box. Or as one observer put it, they took the box, ripped it up, and completely threw it away. Inspired by a farmer in the 1920s, they've transformed second-hand trailers and bales into modern milking parlours. Instead of herding their cattle to a shed every day, they take the sheds directly to the cows. Everything is really done in the open air all year round. And what might have started as a cost-saving exercise, and the figures will astound you, has thrown up many, many more benefits. Great tasting milk, family-friendly working hours, cows that live 12 to 13 years instead of around 3 when intensively farmed, and super relaxed cattle. I should know a few of them enjoyed rubbing themselves against me as I recorded this conversation with Tom. Enjoy my nervousness as I work out whether they are bulls or heifers. Tom, thank you so much for saying yes and agreeing to do this podcast. Nice to meet you.
And likewise.
So, people who listen to this podcast regularly will be used to me kind of going, wow, I'm in this amazing part of the earth, because I tend to go all over the place. Some of them I've done in London, but lots I end up being in the country. This is probably the most fascinating. So can you just explain to people listening where on earth we are, please?
Well, we're just outside Little Breedy, which is where the farm's based. We're sitting on some chalk downland, but all grass. Overlooking a field with 850 cows in it.
You say overlooking a field with 850 cows. There's actually a cow sniffing my foot as I'm talking. So I would say that we're immersed in a field, which is probably normal for you in your day-to-day life, but literally I am surrounded by 800 odd cows a couple of foot away.
Yes, we're in the middle of the cows here, so I stand corrected.
Balanced on the front of a Land Rover. I almost feel like a farmer. So this is, I don't know, how many fields do you have? Just explain a little bit about the space we've got here.
We've got, I think, about 40 fields on the farm, and those fields are subdivided. And we'll go into a new paddock every day. So the cows are getting fresh grass. Actually, they're getting fresh grass 4 times a day. And then we'll move the milking parlours with the cows to a next field each day.
Okay.
And we go around the farm like a clock face, really, from one paddock to the next. So we'll be back in this field in a month's time.
Amazing. And it's always like this, sort of nice cumulus white fluffy clouds, blue sky, bright green grass and happy cows, yeah?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. No, it is, today is idyllic, the sun's shining.
It is
it's very warm.
Perfect.
But we have a lot of snow. Well, I say we've had a lot of snow over the last 2 years, so we're milking in the snow and the rain. And we get a bit of mud, but there's more good days than bad. We probably have a couple of tough weeks in December and a couple of tough weeks in March.
Okay.
But we're applying sun cream when we're milking.
Yeah, well, it's incredible. And we'll come into the details as to why what you do is so different and how literally you are in the fields all year and how that compares to traditional farming. But I want to go back a little bit before we get into the detail of what you do now. I just want to find out, what got you into farming? Have you been doing this from a lad? Are you from a family of farmers?
Yes, a family farm. So I was brought up on a farm with my father, my uncle and cousins and grandparents. So I've never really known anything different. I always wanted to get into farming. It's a job and it's a lifestyle as well. And so that's what I did. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 17. So I was then farming with my uncle and cousins and one of my brothers. That was fairly good for, or maybe the first 20 years of my farming career. And then sadly, as family farms sort of split up, there's a bit of a family fallout, and myself and my family, my mother, left the family farm, which I guess we'd been there since 1870, I think. Wow. So it was a bit upsetting at the time, but then we said, right, what are we going to do next? And I went away to college in Devon, at agricultural college, and there I met my now business partner. We met on day one, and
this is Neil. Yeah?
This is Neil, yeah, Neil Grigg. So we met at college. We became sort of best mates. From there on, we're at college together for 2 years. We then went off in our separate directions. I went back to the family farm, and Neil went back to his family farm. He then decided to retrain and actually qualified as a chartered accountant, and went into accounting as well as farming. So he was part-time accounting and part-time farming. And then in 2009, with sort of our family split up, Neil was looking to get into dairy farming and said, well, maybe, why don't we look at trying to go dairy farming together? And I was part of a sort of intensive farming business previously, and so we looked at more of an extensive farming, cows outside all year round, grazing grass. So we looked at opportunities from Hampshire to Gloucester and down to Cornwall, from 2009 to 2011. And then fortunately, after sort of 10 different sort of failed opportunities, we came second or didn't have the right capital to go and take on a tenancy. We were fortunate enough to get this tenancy from Sir Philip Williams on the Bridehead estate, or offered the opportunity to come here. It was a very large farm. 880 acres at the time. So we offered the opportunity, but because it was slightly bigger than what we were looking for, we had to think slightly outside the box of how we were going to capitalise the project, because it was more to do that. It was more money than we had available to start the farm. And most traditional dairy farms, you pour concrete, you have your cows in the sheds, and it's a very capital hungry project to start. So we've started at a fraction of the cost by having these milking bales outside in the field that we move every day. So we've got no slurry storage, we've got no food haulage, we've got no concrete to pour or yards to scrape or dirty water systems to get rid of any effluent. So our cow is our forage harvester, which cuts the grass. It's our dung spreader, and it provides us milk. And but what we did as a start, this is how we're going to get into farming cheaply, actually has evolved into, we've got these really relaxed cows now. We're milking them in their environment rather than taking them back to our environment to milk them.
Yeah. So because traditional farming, because I'm fascinated doing a bit of research into in the difference of cost, because normally the barrier to entry to get into dairy farming from scratch, and this is even with you, with at least having all of the knowledge and understanding of how it works, basically it's a huge amount of capital, and that's because traditional farming is investment in the barns and also investment in technology. Lots of cows are now milked by robots. Can you just explain a little bit about what's the traditional approach before we get into the difference with what you do?
What's the traditional? I guess from, basically after the war, 1940s, we weren't self-sufficient as a country in food. So farmers were encouraged to produce more. Well, a cow living in a barn in a controlled environment is not sheltering from the wind and rain. So it will produce more if it's inside. So bringing your food inside, and in taking the dung away. So I guess dairying has evolved to be slightly more of an indoor business to increase production. But of course, when you've spent £1 million on a barn, you need to gain from that investment. And that that's I guess we've been industry driven by the consumer and by government policies to put cows inside and intensification. Well, that was fine, and probably until the early 90s, and then with world free trade and that sort of stuff, milk price dropped hugely, and it's been really challenging for all farmers to suddenly producing milk on a world price basis, unless you've got an exclusive contract. But I think 85% of dairy farmers in the UK would be basically subject to the world market forces. We're now on about 30p a litre for our milk. In 2016, we were on 18p for our milk, which was well below the cost of production. Out of your hands, there's nothing we can do about that. So it's been very tough for a conventional system, which if you do build that system, it's maybe cost you about £7,000 per cow place. We've been able to set up at just over £300 a cow place. It's a huge amount.
Yeah, a mind-blowing statistic.
Yes.
When I read that last night.
So that's sort of how we've got there. It's nothing or Neil and I have been clever about doing particularly. I guess it's the circumstances we found ourselves in have driven us down this route. And again, I don't ever like to be compared to any other farming system. We don't produce milk in the winter months. And if you want milk on your cornflakes, you're going to have to get, over Christmas, you're going to have to get your milk from a cow that's producing milk inside. And I mean, the amazing thing about the British dairy industry is there's so many different ways to do it. You can milk with robots, you can milk on a rotary parlour, you can have your cows inside all year round, you can have your cows half inside and half outside, or like ours, outside all year round. We are really feral free range, if you could call it that. It's tough on people being outside all the time, but it's great for our cows, and okay. I think if you look at them, they're fairly well relaxed.
We're literally now surrounded, 360 degrees. They're clearly fascinated. They don't eat Land Rovers, do they?
They give it a good lick.
Yeah, okay. So I found that, and I appreciate the downside, and I hadn't appreciated that. Doing a bit of research last night, looking at this entry level cost of 350 quid a cow compared to £7,000 a cow, it looks almost too good to be true, but I guess if you haven't got milk in the winter, there's certainly one compromise. But can we go into a little detail then about how it works with you, what you do? Because you're called the open air dairy. How does it work by contrast to that industrial process you spoke of?
Well, I guess our cows are outside eating. I mean, the diet would be 95% grass, buttercups, daisies, whatever's out here in the field. Clover, plenty of clover. And so the production we'd be getting out of our cows would get about 4,300 litres a year on average from the cows, which is obviously mainly from grass. Grass gives a lot of flavour to milk, so there's a lot of Jersey cow and Channel Island genetics within our cows. Our cows are a lot smaller, so they're sort of 450 kilogram animals, whereas more of a traditional Holstein would be around 700 kilos. So a lot bigger cows, but we want the girls to be light on their feet. They then don't get lame. They're also okay to be outside in wet conditions.
And this is to do with the breed of the cow or what they eat?
Yeah, so this is the breed of the cows, why they're this size, but also within the genetics of the cow, they're just very good grass converters, so turning grass into milk.
Right. Is cow going to hump me?
Yes. No, she just wants a stroke round the ears. If you give her a stroke, she'll...
Great. So I should at least be able to guess the sex of the cow. Clearly not going to hump me. So go with that funny horn on the top. I wasn't sure, but that's good. I was just being, for those of you listening, what's the word? Rubbed. Let's say rubbed by a cow. Okay, so so it's the breed of the cow, but also presumably they're not in the commercial or in the industrial process. They're fed a lot more, are they? I don't know if it's force fed or they're just fed something that.
No. So it's I would sort of relate it to, if you want to relate cows and cars as a parallel. These little cows are like like a little Land Rover, really. They're designed for all conditions, not particularly quick but very robust. A cow that's inside being milked 3 times a day is a little bit more of a Ferrari, very high performer. You can't put that cow that's used to being in a barn outside in a field. albeit they're both called cows and they have 4 legs and they may be black and white, they really are very different animals.
Okay.
And it would almost be cruel to put a house cow outside.
And they never go outside. They're inside all year.
Some cows are, yes. And then they've got these, comfortable cubicles, either water beds or sand beds, automatic scraping facilities, keeping everything, sterile, completely sterile, almost in a hospital environment as an indoor cow. We just do it a little bit differently. There's a little bit more mud and sweat out in the field. But we've got an animal that's designed to live outside in the rain and the wind or in the sunshine as we are today.
And you mentioned that your cows would produce 4,300 litres a year. What would be the literage from an inside cow?
Oh, anything up to 15,000 litres a year.
Okay, so 3 times as much. And then the key point, apart from them being outside, the thing that was, I don't know, particularly clever, although in many ways you're going back to a more traditional approach, is you milk them in the fields rather than having to take them back to the barns or the concrete area. So how does that work? How do you actually milk a cow in a field? I'm imagining somebody sat there with a little tin, like I've seen in The Sound of Music, but it's not quite that process.
No, there is a little bit of music. So we've got 2 trailers. They're 40-foot trailers, which can milk 20 cows at a time. So at any one point, we're milking 40 cows at a time. The trailers actually hold 80 cows, so 20 are waiting, or 40 cows are waiting, should I say, whilst 40 cows being milked. And as soon as they step off the milking parlour, they're back onto the grass again. So they're eating or lying down, and then they get up and get milked, which is about a 10-minute process. And then they're back eating grass again in the field. And that's become, come rain or shine. And then that milking parlour is then moved every afternoon. So we get a fresh milking spot for the evening milking and the following morning. And then any dung or slurry that's left, any washings off the milking parlour is in the field. Directly, there's no secondary movement of anything.
Right, and then you were explaining to me as we drove around and saw this. I'm laughing because this cow is using me as I suppose an itching stick. Fundamentally, they got some pressure behind them, aren't they? When you're wedged in between a cow and a Land Rover.
I think you're probably only 80 kilos and she's 450.
Although I've got the better end than the other one that's just having a pee. But what I found fascinating as we were driving around is this self-management process. So because they're in a more natural environment, you were saying about the pecking order and how the cows actually go through this parlour. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in the morning we'll rock up at 6:30 and we'll lift a wire up to expose more grass. So probably 2 or 3 acres of fresh grass. So the cows are all run in because as a cow, if they hear a fence reel whine, they think, oh, fresh grass. So they all run into the yard behind the milking parlour, and they'll eat the fresh grass in front of them for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then half the cows will lie down, and then half of them will walk to the milking parlour to get milked. Now, their motivation to get milked is they know once they get milked, they get even more fresh grass. So when they come through the milking parlour, they're 10 minutes for milking. And then they're off, and as they have today, trotted down over the hill to get a fresh break of grass that we're standing in now. And then as the cows, they have a pecking order, so you have a greedy one or a slow one. They need plenty of space around each other to move past each other. So with the big yard that we have that they can feed in, they'll all lie down. And then gradually, individually, they'll all get up in near enough the same order every day and go through the milking parlour. And it's something we've had to learn. There was no one we could copy that was milking cows outside, on the scale that we're doing here. So we've had to find this out. So to start off with, we're very conventional with a small little rectangular yard. And the cows flowing through the milking parlour wasn't working very well. So we said one day, well, let's just give them a massive yard and no one had to get a cow in, and they just volunteered to come through and that's what they do now. And it's just led to everyone on the farm being relaxed, the cows being relaxed. And as you say, in the field with us at the moment, there's 60 bulls. They're all relaxed. We're all natural insemination here. And so it's just a little bit more of a natural cycle.
Because in a traditional milking parlour, how are the cows? They're forced through, or at least encouraged somewhat more than you need to.
So some people would feed in a milking parlour, so they'd go and get some cereals, some cow cake, as we would call it, so little feeders. So they're encouraged to go into the milking parlour to get a little feed of concentrates. We don't have any feeding system on our parlour. It is a very simple milking parlour. So we don't do that. You know, you would have I guess, in a conventional, you'd have a small rectangular concrete yard. So you'd get a group maybe, and you'd have batches of animals. You'd bring maybe 50 in at a time, milk them, and then bring another 50 in, whilst their beds are being cleaned and that process. So it's a little bit more of a precision sort of operation,
right.
Compared to here, which is a little bit. I shouldn't say ramshackle, but it's just it's a very simple.
Yeah, it feels a bit like a festival. It feels like, if I was a cow, I'd be quite happy here. And that motor, so the pecking order you talk of, it's done by what, the most important cow goes first. How do they decide? I appreciate you don't speak cow, but what's the,
yes? Just in front of you here, this is a little heifer. So she's only probably 2 years, 3 months old.
Right.
So she's had her calf for the first time this year. And now, she's in a milking cycle. So generally, because they're the youngest, they might stay at the back.
Right. Okay.
And just wait for the older cows to go through. And then you got sort of older granny cows. So that one with the orange ear tag there, she's 12 years old. Now she might be being less dominant now and wants to just take it easy. So she might come through, midway through. And I guess if you'd imagine, say, everyone queuing up for a ski lift, you get a few people that push in and, be a bit rude, and other people that are, oh, no, you go in front of me. And they just sort it out the same as us, really.
Right, okay. Amazing. And then, so I know you're deliberately not sort of critical of other ways and doing it this way. It's just like you say, you need multiple ways of looking after cows, I suppose, and particularly if we want milk all year round. But what apart from the finances, I get the impression that you don't now just do this because it makes economic sense. It looks like you've sort of fallen in love with this as a way of looking after cows compared to the kind of traditional system you had as a kid. Is that fair, or what's your experience around that?
Yes, I mean, the whole system was designed because we didn't have much cash to get into farming. So, and then we had a fantastic opportunity which we couldn't really turn down. So we had to think outside the box. I guess with Neil's accounting skills, you're right. Actually, if we do this, do that. I was the practical guy that's got to make it work. So Neil says, look, I think we can do it if we could milk on a trailer. We don't have to do this, that, and the other. Can you build a system? Of which myself and the team on the farm have done. So we've made it work. Just so we could make it work. The knock-on effect of that is now what we're seeing with the commercial interest we've had in what we're doing. We've got these cows that are super relaxed. The production's gone up because of that situation. The milk quality is second to none. So the flavours we're getting in our cheese at the moment, which is solely coming from grass, I think is reflected because the cows are so relaxed. And the cows lasting longer. We get very little lameness in the cows. So we're so I'm a bit wary of quoting figures. I don't know, but we've got about 3% of the herd maybe are lame here, or have a lameness issue, which is hugely lower than sort of like the national average, should you say?
What causes that?
I guess it's walking. Right. And these girls aren't walking anywhere. What we're on is we're on a very flinty farm, so you get flints coming up through the grass, which causes lameness when you get a sort of a spiky flint in your foot. But I guess lameness is caused in cows by walking up and down tracks, or spending a lot of time on concrete. So more traditional systems would sort of be foot trimming quite regularly and doing a lot of hoof health. They'd have foot baths and pedicures almost as in the cow sense. We don't actually have to do any of that here because we're not in that sort of environment, right. I suppose. And so with that, your cows are lasting longer. So we're getting cows that are lasting 10, 12 years old.
And what's the norm again in a more industrial approach?
Maybe 3 lactations, so a cow living to 5 years would be an average figure for an intensive cow.
So that's a remarkable figure. When I read that last night, I think I'd read 2.5 and 12 years or something like that.
Yes.
That feels incredible.
Yes.
Again, as a consumer rather than a farmer, seems fantastic. Have you been surprised by I don't know, the learnings that you've gone on and the change in approach? Have you been surprised by what's possible and the pleasure that you get from doing this compared to a traditional approach? I say traditional. This is traditional. If you go back far enough, but let's say post 1940 traditional, I suppose. Yeah, intensive.
Am I surprised? I think I just enjoy it every day, and every day's a school day, so we're always learning something new. And I guess it's been a nice thing for what sort of economic reasons for doing what we've done. Is actually you look at the herd and the health status we've got. It's just really pleasing that actually what you're doing is working for the cows as well as it's working for us.
And you're clearly humble and laid back, but this wasn't easy, was it? In 2009, you had the idea, or I think you saw somebody else who was doing it on a much smaller scale. Is that correct?
Yes, we went to visit a chap on the Somerset Levels who had the old sort of hosier milking bales, which was sort of pioneered in the 1920s. Chap called Tom Tinknell. And he very kindly invited us up, and we went and had lunch with his family, and he showed us what he did. And he was milking 170 cows through 2 old hosier bales, and was just doing a phenomenal job here. He actually brought on the Somerset Levels, obviously it's underwater during the winter, so he was milking out on the levels during the summer, and then bringing his bales back and milking them, putting them in the barn, and milking the cows in the barn over the winter. And so looking at that gave us the inspiration for thinking, actually, can we scale it up and do it a bit bigger and modernise the machinery and build our own.
But whilst you were trying to do that, you had the idea, there was this sort of 3-year period where you didn't have any land to do it, but that didn't stop you buying cows. Again, in the city, in the normal world, we wouldn't think, okay, let's start getting cows now. We've got no plan. Can you just explain, A, why, and B, how many cows did you get over that sort of 3-year period before you actually had anywhere to do this?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing I learned, in suddenly having the sort of rug pulled from beneath you and where I was in the family business, and suddenly you're there out on your own, what am I going to do next? And someone said you need to set goals. So in 2009 we set a goal to milk 300 cows. Hello, Bully.
It's a big lad.
Sorry, a big bull's just walked over. Have a bit of a sniff. He's wonders what's going on.
Yeah. I'll let you take charge at this point. If he starts rubbing against my leg, you might see me looking a bit more nervous.
Yeah. No, he's all right. So we set goals that we wanted to milk 300 cows, find a farm, 250 acres, and milk 300 cows somewhere in the southwest.
Right.
And so with that, we were doing a bit of research. But then the problem is to grow a calf and then get a cow and calf ready to milk. It's the same gestation period for a calf as it is a human, 9 months.
Right.
And it's a bit of a chicken and egg. What do you get? You get a farm, and then you've got to get your cows. But if you've got not much cash, what do you do? So we were buying sort of empty cows. So these are cows that aren't in calf, so they're not going to produce milk. And then giving them another chance with a bull to get in calf. But then that would be a year until she's going to have a baby to then be able to milk. Then we were buying young calves, which are obviously a lot cheaper than buying a cow. So you need to then grow that for a couple of years before then you can get her in calf to then produce milk. So we decided to build a herd, and I rented fields in Beer Regis and the Tolliver, and then we were grazing the Poundbury building site around the roundabout at the fire station, or the fire station wasn't even there when we started. And I was asking anyone with a bit of free grazing what we could do. So to make that plan of having 300 cows ready to milk in 2012, which was the goal. And in the meantime, looking at tenancy options and contract farming agreements across the south. And that's how we ended up with this opportunity. And we came here with 300 cows. And then sort of the evolution from that was actually we got a farm that could milk 800 cows. So without building a static parlour and concrete and slurry pits and that side of things, we were able to buy some more cows to then start the process. And we started off milking 450 cows in 2012, our first season. Everyone said, how's it gonna go milking outside in a wet year? And I don't know if you remember 2012, but we had double the rainfall we were meant to. Winterbourne Abbas flooded, and actually it worked really well. We had 4 inches of rain during one milking, which was pretty tough on people, but actually we all had big smiles on our faces because actually we knew the system could work even in the wet,
Right.
which was always, what are you going to do on a rainy day? And
Yeah. So the challenge, you'd seen it done at 170, milking once a day, presumably. Could you scale that up to 800? Now, am I right in thinking that this approach does exist in New Zealand? Was it?
No. So we're using a New Zealand grazing method. So in New Zealand, most of the cows eat grass on a paddock grazing system, new break of grass every 12 hours, but the parlour is still static. It's a cheaper form of milking, so you'd still have a milking parlour centrally in the farm, but you would have a lot of tracks leading back to those milking parlours. So that's sort of the New Zealand grazing method, which has been adopted by quite a few farms in this country. So you'll still walk the cows back and they'll be out at grass all year round, but they will be walked back to a central site.
Every day?
Every day.
To be milked.
So the chap on the Somerset Levels, and Arthur Hosey, who designed the system in the 1920s, was the first sort of chap that we know of taking a mechanical parlour out to the field and leaving it out there. And he had 2 men and 50 cows was a team, and built a big milking empire, from 1920 to 1940. We've just copied that, and I don't like to be smart. We've just copied a lot of clever people along the way, and we've not really done anything original.
Yeah, but that's the way of most businesses. I think I make a living out of serving food to people, and I didn't really invent food, I don't think. Yes. I think it's been around for quite a while. So, but yeah, we tweak and learn. So one of the challenges then, having gone, right, okay, we get the system, we can see the advantages, but you needed the kit to actually be able to do it. So these parlours that you tow into the fields and literally, take them to the cows rather than bring the cows to the kit, they didn't really exist, did they? Or you did manage to find some, or you found one buried in a ditch or being grown over by grass?
So we were looking at the old hosier bales, and there's a few in sort of hedges and bits and pieces, and we thought we needed 8 of those old bales, and I think we'd found 4. And then a local dairy engineer, Richard Churchill, said, well, there's a herringbone sort of milking trailer over at Winfrith. And so we went over to Fields Farm in Winfrith and found this temporary, or as a mobile milking parlour in a hedge. And I spoke to the chap who hired them out, and he had 6 of these parlours in the 80s, which we was hiring out regularly when people were refitting a current parlour in their shed. Would hire this temporary milking parlour, put it in their yard. It would take about a day to set up, and then once they rebuilt their own dairy unit, they'd be milking their cows through this for about a month. But I think as the milk price dropped, people stopped doing up their old milking parlours, and they either decided to get out of milking, or they were going to build a new shed and double the size of their herd. So these mobile milking parlours became almost obsolete. Anyway, we got in touch with him and we hired 3 for the first year, and then we had to alter them a lot because it took a day to move them, to try and get the movement down to, say, an hour or 2. And then what we learned over that first year in 2012 of how to do it, I then designed a new milking parlour. These parlours would only milk 12 cows at a time. So then we designed another one that would milk 20 cows at a time. They also had steps on rather than ramps. The cows were slipping on a ramp. Someone did tell me cows wouldn't go up steps, but we put these steps on, and actually the cows love running up and down steps.
You didn't know that until you built it?
No, not at all. There was a chap in Wales that had built an underpass with steps, and he told me they ran through, which was hard to believe. And I asked him for the dimensions of the steps. I just put the same on, and I thought it's easy to turn some steps into a ramp if it didn't work. But it did, and it's worked very well. So in the winter of 2012-13, we built the first parlour. Together with a local engineer, Mike Fry, gave a fair bit of input to help us do it. And then 2014, we built our second one, and then we off-hired the parlours, the temporary parlours that we'd had. And so we had our own sort of bespoke kit. We started with 2 old hospital generators, which were 25 years old. I think they gradually blew up, and then we sort of bought a newer generator. So it was all second-hand kit, sort of done at a shoestring price. And I guess we never knew whether it was going to work. To invest in new gear and trying to do it, was always a bit of a challenge. And I guess that's now evolved into other farmers now are asking us Could you build us a system? Can we come and have a look round? So we're starting to show people round. We've now built 2 systems for two different farmers. So that's another thing we never planned on doing, but we're now manufacturing milking parlours.
Opportunity knots. I've got to ask before I ask the next question, but I'd say at least 50% of the cows in the field just sat down and have laid down. What does that mean? Anything, or is it?
Yeah. So what they've done is they've been milked. They've come over and they've filled their bellies with grass, so the fresh grass. They're now sitting down. They're all chewing their cud. So a cow, once it's filled its first stomach, will then lie down and then bring it back up and they chew their cud. And so they're just chilled out now, so they haven't got to walk anywhere else. They might actually all get up in a minute and go for a drink.
Right.
To the water trough. So they're
all at the same time. Are they creatures? Does one do it? Because literally, I mean, it's not all of it. There must be at least 50%. All did it within the space of about 90 seconds. Is it? They follow each other.
I don't know. The leader cow must have let out a shout. Come on, let's have a
little lie down and chat. I'll tell you what, it looks looking pretty idyllic. And again, going off on a bit of a tangent. So you say what's that? They chew the cud and what's the process and how long does this go on for before it turns into milk? Am I going back into your biology days?
You asked me this, and I was a very poor student. The cow has 7 stomachs.
7 stomachs. Okay, I've misremembered 4 from my childhood.
And I can tell you what, abomason, no mason, rumen, reticulum.
Hey, God, your teacher's going to be listening going, I'm bloody proud of that boy, well done.
Yeah, that's about all I can remember. So you put me on the spot now. But yeah. So anyway.
They all do something.
They all do something, and they can eat grass and we can't.
Right, okay.
And so... so they sit down, they relax, and so actually they're now converting the grass into milk. They're making some milk. So if the cow's standing up and eating or lying down and chewing a cud, you're doing a good job.
Right.
If they're all heaped up in a corner of a field and something's upsetting them, then they're not making milk. So to have them relax like this, if a cow's relaxed, they're going to produce milk. Yeah. And it's the misconception of farmers being cruel to animals, or whatever. It's never in your interest. An animal will perform to you, whether it's putting on weight or whether it's milking, producing wool or whatever. But they only do that if they're relaxed and happy. Mm. And so all of us, whether you're keeping a cow inside or a cow outside or a sheep on a mountain or wherever, you want them to be happy in the environment they're in. And then if they do, then they'll perform to what you want.
So you were the first guys to be doing this on this kind of scale then. You've basically developed your own kit, albeit it's an evolution of other people's kit. And now people are they're looking at what you're doing and they're saying, we might do the same, can you help? What's their primary motivation? How much of this is coming from a cash perspective and how much of it is coming from the kind of the change we seem to be seeing with the consumer around animal welfare?
I think... the farm that's taken on the Kingsclear estate up near Basingstoke. It's a very large arable estate, and they wanted to rotate grass with their arable crops. Starting to put organic matter back into the soil. The chap up there called Tim Mays, very clever, very concerned about soil and the environment, and so he saw it as a way of, instead of converting his farm to a dairy farm, where you would have to then put tracks and bits and pieces across his big arable fields, he thought, well, actually, you don't have to put any tracks in. I can get cows to rotate with my arable crops. They can put the goodness in. They eat grass. 90% of the grass comes out the back end in the form of poo, which is then organic matter. That's then feeding the soil microbes and worms and the rest of the ecosystem, and then you take a little bit of milk away, and then in turn your arable crops that come after that are then feeding off that fertility that you're putting back into the soil. So he's seen it for the goodness of a soil.
Can I say, is that a 1 year thing? Do you put the cows on the field for a year, or is it a couple of years?
I think he's 5 years of these herbal lays. I think he's putting up there. Right. You'd have to speak to Tim directly to confirm that. But so he would be, a proportion of his, a fifth, say, of his farm would be down to herbal lays, and then the rest of it would be arable, and then he'll just rotate it round.
Herbal lays, that's what the cows eat? Is that what you're talking about?
Herbal lays, it sounds great, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it's a wider variety of grasses and legumes.
Right.
Deeper rooting. He's also organic.
Right.
So it's a new sort of process of having these herbal lays. They're more of a diverse sort of grass.
Okay.
I'd
Off the
say.
back of what, a learning about or a consumer demand for organic, or just a continued evolution and learning of what's effective farming?
I think as all of us as farmers, you're trying to do the best for the environment, really, and no one wants to lose their soil because then your productivity goes down. So we're all trying to be good farmers and look after the farms, and you get a few highlighted cases where something's gone wrong, but it's never intentional. All of us want to look after the wildlife, whether you're an intensive arable farmer or not, or an intensive dairy farmer or extensive, but we're all trying to do the best we can for the environment on our farm, as well as trying to run a commercial business and make money to provide for our families. So, whether you're a very rich, estate owner with 5,000 acres, we're all concerned about the land. Anyone living on it is. So it's there's just different ways of doing the job, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's been a lot of publicity, I guess, of the supermarkets, I suppose, and the pressure on milk, and therefore this challenge where I think you're right. Every farmer I meet generally seems to want to look after the land, want to look after the animals, but also say we've got to make a living. There's a point where we can, and a point where we can't. Is that getting worse or getting better, that situation?
I guess the UK has got the highest welfare standards and food standards in the world, and that's full stop. That's a statement. Where I think us as English British farmers is when you're allowed to import food into this country that doesn't have those standards, and which is then taking out our product. So we end up, as English farmers, British farmers, have a higher cost of production than most other people because of the restrictions that are put on us, because of the traceability, because of the systems. This is probably more expensive to produce milk doing it our way than maybe an intensive cow in a barn. But that price isn't reflected. And I guess there's a lot of people say I like organic or I like it extensive, but it's not actually what's put in the shopping basket. And that's probably the toughest thing as farmers, is how do you get that message across that you've got to pay a little bit more money. And there's always, milk is in everyone's shopping basket, so you have to go shopping for milk 3 times a week. So if the milk is cheapest in that shop, you'll be going to that one. So it's always almost sold as a loss leader milk, which is very tough being a dairy farmer, and you're working hard. Bottled water is more expensive than milk. That just comes out of the ground or out of a tap. So it's frustrating, and the worry, Brexit, another massive thing for farmers, is what's going to happen. Our deal's going to be done where there's free trade, because if there's free trade, then there's a lot of imported food coming in with lower standards, which basically blows us all out the water.
And this comes from the fact that the expectation is more food will come from outside of Europe rather than within Europe, because although you say the UK's got the best standards, presumably a significant amount of stuff comes in from Europe at the moment. So although we're the best, they're the second best. Is the concern it's more stuff coming in from Europe, or it's more stuff coming from out of Europe?
I wouldn't know the proportions of what comes in or out. We're definitely not self-sufficient in dairy products or milk in this country. Right. We're a net importer.
Okay.
But there's still, we import, which is like, it says supply and demand. We should be, which you should think in this country we will have a higher milk price because of it, because we've got to buy it in. The risks of doing a deal with the US, there's import tariffs on US stuff at the moment. They can produce food cheaper than anyone else. They've got these mega dairies of 80,000 cows, 100,000 cows. They can produce dairy products very cheaply. If we did a deal with no tariffs with them, I think 90% of consumers would be buying the cheapest food that's on the shelf. I think.
Yeah,
and that's the worry about the industry. And I'm not a clever enough man to know about that. And these are all buts and ifs.
Yep.
So what I've got to do is concentrate on what I'm doing. I've got to concentrate on my cost of production to try and keep my costs as low as possible. And then if I can try, I'm talking to you, so I'm trying to promote myself, I guess. Within that, if I can then promote myself and make a difference there's a difference between me and there's a difference between a farmer in the US, you hope people would choose what we're doing. So that's within my control. What I don't want to do is I don't want to moan about the weather because I'm a farmer. I'm sorry, I signed up to what weather comes at me, we got to deal with. I also knew going into this business that I was subject to world market forces and subject to government policy. Yeah. So we can have a moan, you can try and influence it, but actually the main things I can concentrate on is my farming system. I can choose to do that. My cost of production, I can try and be as efficient as I can and then shout about what we're doing and doing well. And, I hope that you educate people and people like what you're doing. And without, we can only do what the consumer wants.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? And it's a frustration, and it's all very well, living our middle class lives and saying people should pay a little bit more for milk. And I hope by having these conversations that it makes people realise, because it's come up a number of times, particularly around the US, things like chlorinated chicken and animal standards and stuff, but not just the US, the further east you go in Europe, certainly how we're going to manage the borders. And I suppose it's whose responsibility is it? Is it government regulation? Is it the supermarkets who are actually, negotiating the price? And should they just sell on price, or actually do they have a responsibility to also think about nutrition and animal welfare? Or is it actually just the consumer? And the more the consumer understands and the more they know, and I guess the answer is it's all three. But what's your sales pitch to the consumer? What can they do to help?
I'm pausing for a long while. I guess choose British food, really, and research into if you have the time, and everyone generally now has a smartphone which you can Google, just research into what you're doing. If you've got that idle 5 minutes and saying, well, actually, I might just Google the standards of the milk I picked up today, or where my crisps come from, or a chocolate bar, or whatever, and are you comfortable with what you bought? And actually, you might say, well, actually, I've just bought a Japanese car. Am I happy with how that's made? And, I could have bought a British one, but it was more expensive. Well, there's an economic reason why I've done it. I prefer to buy a Japanese car because it's cheaper, it's better made, or not. So I'm not saying you have to do it, but just as long as you're happy with your decisions that you make, then that's fine. But I guess we as consumers have got to make an informed decision, and we all can now. There's plenty of research out there. Yeah.
I think it's one of the motivations for me having this conversation is that I'm in a market. Admittedly, I'm on the coalface, but it ripples back. I sell a lot of cappuccinos and I sell a lot of lattes, and I've become increasingly concerned about the race to the bottom in the dining sector, without mentioning brands, because otherwise I get in trouble with the lady who helps me produce this. But the most popular pubs and restaurants and bars on the high street are kind of cheap and cheerful and sell crap, and I just want and there needs to be a market for that, because not everybody's got the spare cash. But what frustrates me is the number of people who actually have got the money, and it's when they do it subconsciously rather than consciously. I think they just drift along, they don't think about it. They'll go into a Thai restaurant and order some chicken and not appreciate that chicken's been flown over from Thailand and it's been injected with a kind of saline solution to make it heavier and make it have more value, or where prawns come from. The fact that most prawns are grown in Vietnam and Thailand and they're pumped full of antibiotics and they're shit, but most people will just go to a restaurant and go, oh, I love prawns, I'll have prawns on the starter, and they don't ask the questions. And I don't know why that is, but I think we should try and help people.
Yes, yeah, well said.
So we're at least doing our bit. So we've talked a bit about happy animals. We've talked a little bit about costs. Actually, I've got to go back to something you said, because you said that you producing milk your way is potentially more expensive than through the intensive approach. But so is that the case? Is it still nuanced? Because you've basically got much lower cost of investment. You've got lower, presumably, capital cost.
I think maybe our variable costs will be slightly high. There's more people running around here, which is why these girls are not maybe too concerned about people. They're not scared of us at all.
It's true.
So
I've
got quite a big team around us,
right.
And we had was the last storm of rain came in. I can't remember, was it a couple of Fridays ago? And instead of 3 people milking, there was 5 of us out here. Just because it was backs against wall, chaps, right? We've all got to muck in together. It's really raining hard. Let's get this job done quickly.
To do it faster, or because it's hard, or what makes it hard?
It is. It's no one's enjoying. The cows are not enjoying the rain in their face and that sort of stuff. Some of the cows wouldn't actually come onto the front of the milking parlour because they're enjoying. There's shelter, so we've got a roof over the parlours here. But at the front of the parlour, because the rain was coming sideways at you, the cows wouldn't stand in the first 5 stalls.
Right.
So actually, it meant we could only use 3/4 of the milking parlour. Now, there's 2 ways of looking at that. You go, well, push them up so they're getting the rain in the face, or not. Well, the idea was actually we won't push them up, but we just milk the back 15 cows, and get them through that way. And it's just unpleasant. So you just want to get the job over and done with. Someone did a bacon sandwich run, and a bit of hot coffee going on. And that, I guess, having to deal with the weather because we're not in a controlled environment is a cost to what we're doing.
Right.
Again, this business is not only we're looking after all the cows, we're looking after a lot of people. And then with that, their families and that sort of stuff. So we want to have a good environment for people to work in here. And I think as a duty of care, if people are struggling, then you want to try and make it easier.
Okay. So lots of benefits. How about the actual sort of working day and the work quality life, apart from being outside in the rain, which must be the downside? How does it compare? So if you say intensively could be up to 4 times a day, you're milking twice a day. What does the day look like as a farmer here compared to intensive, and is there a benefit or disbenefit on either of those?
Yeah, so for us, we do things slightly differently. We start at 6:30. We meet, the cows are all in and started milking by 7 o'clock.
Why so early?
Because we want to milk twice a day.
Right.
And so ideally you want to split that milking between 10 hours apart at least. So if you're milking, say, cows 3 times a day, you'd be milking every 8 hours to try and... You want an even split between all your milkings.
Okay. Only bakers have it worse than that. That's the other one I asked. Yes. They seem to start at 4, so just interested. But yeah, go on.
And where I was milking at home, I was at home on the family farm before, which was an intensive system. I was starting at 3:30 milking in the morning, or getting up 3:30, getting to the dairy at 4 o'clock.
Again,
yes.
Because of the need to do 4 times a day?
Well, that was 3 times a day milking. So we were starting milking at 4, then 12 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock, I think it was. Sorry, the dog's just getting a bit upset. The cows are rubbing the Land Rover so hard.
It does move around quite a lot, this Land Rover. I was slightly worried there was a bull at the back, but yeah.
Hopefully the lights are still on at the back. Anyway, so our day now starts. So I'm trying, the waking hours of human being are sort of 6, 7 o'clock, and then we go to bed at 10 o'clock. Traditionally, milking has always been early in the morning, at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you're checking your cows at 10 o'clock at night. And when I was doing that in the previous business, if you were milking, there wasn't any time for anything else in the day. You couldn't go out and socialise in the evening and go out to restaurant because you knew you had to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You were then trying to sleep during the middle of the day, which is when the kids were coming back from school. And it was just, it was almost a vocation. You were milking and that was it. Now with our guys here, they can be on an early shift, so they can do a morning milking and then work in the afternoon. They're still home by 4 or 5 o'clock, or they can be on an evening shift, so they come in at 1 o'clock and then be home by 10 o'clock at night. So it's still within your waking hours. Your sleep pattern's not broken, so you still have time to live life. It's okay, I love this farm to bits. It's my business. You want everyone that works on the farm to love it as much as you, but it's a job. People want to earn money, and they have other interests. They have other family that they want to see. So if you can make the hours pleasant for them, and this is why it's always been difficult in farming. I've been there doing 18 hours every day and 15 hours a day or 12-hour days, getting the harvest in or doing whatever, but it isn't really sustainable for the long period of time. And I think there's a big turnover of staff within agriculture, because it's a big pressure on family life, working long hours. And so if we can keep members of the team here for long periods of time because they're enjoying the life and the farm fits in with their life, we're working to live rather than living to work. But also earning a reasonable amount of money. And
so important. Happy team, happy farmer, happy cows. All sounds good so far. You mentioned one of the downsides is that you can't milk all year. So what's your period where you can't milk?
Yeah, so a cow will milk for 9 months of the year. For a cow to milk, it has to have a baby calf. And then when it has a calf, then it starts producing milk. And so when the cow gets heavily pregnant, obviously the baby's taking up all the room, so in her body cavity, so the stomach has to shrink, so then she can't eat enough food to grow a calf and produce milk. So all our girls have 3 months off, so we stop milking in December and then we start milking again in March. And we're managing not cows as individuals, we're managing them on a herd basis. So we try and get all the cows to have their babies in March, and then we'll milk from March through to December. Our milk is all going to, it's all bought by Barbers, who are a cheesemaker. They've got the cheese factory, which is 2 miles away from here, Ford Farm. And so they buy all our milk and it goes into cheese. Now they will have people produce milk in the winter. And I have people that will produce milk in the spring. And then with getting lots of different suppliers together, they get a constant milk flow throughout the year and, make cheese all year round. So I've lost my thread
what do you do in those 3 months then where you're not producing milk?
So in those 3 months, all the cows go off farm and they eat root crops, and any extra grass we grow in the summer, we make hay out of. So they'll eat hay and turnips over the winter, and basically they have 3 months off, chilling out.
Still outside?
Still outside.
In the fields?
Yeah, in the fields.
They mind?
No. No, it's quite a satisfying job feeding turnips. So we're strip graze a field of turnips, and the field goes from green to brown as they eat the turnips off. We do that on local arable farms. So we go in, they sow the turnips for us. We ship the cows to the turnips, and then they stay there for 3 months, and then what the arable farmer gets is organic matter back into his.
How do you get 800 cows to wherever the turnips are?
We can move 24 at a time, and we do roughly 4 trips a day, and they're all within a 10-mile radius of the farm here. Yeah, so tractor and trailer. Right. So they
all get a little holiday.
They all get a little holiday. Yeah. So we can roughly do 4 loads a day. There's roughly 100 cows a day, so that's 8 days of.
So you're busy. Do you keep the team employed then? Because what are you doing for revenue in these 3 months then? Or are you just saving up in the summer?
And that's the big thing for us is cash flow. So all our income comes within 9 months, and then it's sort of shut the checkbook and try not to spend any money over the Christmas period.
Yeah, apart from shipping your cows around Dorset.
Yeah. But I guess what we've done now, and with help from the Barber family, is that they're now making a little bit of cheese for us, and we're because we are, I guess our USP is we're milking in the field, no one else is. There's been a lot of interest in what we're doing, and they've allowed us to, make a little bit of cheese, which we're selling locally, and so we're getting a little bit of cheese income now over the winter months.
And cheese sells in December quite a lot and ready for Christmas and stuff. So I suppose you can, because I guess what I'm thinking is that it looks ideal from many aspects. It looks better for the animals, looks better for the farmer, better for the team. There's got to be some downsides, and I guess a lot of people are looking at it will go, well, the downside is, where am I going to get money for those 3 months? So the idea is you can either make enough when you're in peak season, or you've got to diversify and you've got to come up with some other products. Because I guess it would feel like, again, from a sort of naive consumer perspective, but it would feel like with all of those pluses that more people should be doing this across the country. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think it will expand. I mean, I'd love to say yes, it's the world domination. This is definitely not for everyone, and every farm is different. One of my best friends is on a very sandy, dry farm, sort of next to a river, which sounds funny, but his farm's very good for growing maize, and maize is sort of a very good crop to feed during the winter. So he's got a house cow system. You couldn't do what we're doing on his farm. is very, very wet in the winter and very dry in the summer. So maize is the right crop to grow on that farm. And so he's developed a system on his farm that complements growing maize. So, on a very wet, sort of heavy clay farm in the Blackmore Vale, again, towing a 12-ton milking parlour around every day, you'll be getting stuck up to your axles. So I think it will expand, and it can expand. Will it grow a lot? I couldn't tell you, and a lot of people told me, well, you couldn't do that on my farm, and it's if you want to, then you can almost do anything if you put your mind to it. But definitely, from all the farms we looked at, this was never the goal in 2009 to mobile milk cows around in a field. If we'd found a farm with a shed on it, we'll be milking cows maybe inside, maybe some inside, some outside. So every farm has its own topography, its own advantages and disadvantages. But dry farms, the Salisbury Plains, chalk downland, I can see this expanding, and
Yeah, no, it's good. I guess I'm interested because, it, like you say, it sort of came about by accident in many ways, albeit there was a lot of work in it. But it seems to have so many advantages. But I almost wonder whether you'd try and sell it and convince people that it's the right thing to do. But you're very good at appreciating all aspects. And I guess, like you say, farming's complex. So
it is, and I've got friends throughout the industry with lots of different systems. I don't. I want to promote myself, but I don't want to do it in.
Makes sense. And I'm the same with restaurants.
Dissing other people, really.
I don't diss the other restaurants.
Maybe
albeit I think some of them sell rubbish.
Maybe I'm being commercially naive. I don't know, but there's advantage and disadvantage. Look at my cows on a rainy day, and they're sort of like, oh my God, what are we out here for? And you look at a cow on a house system on a rainy day, and they're inside tucked up in a bed, and everything's great. But then on a sunny day, the cow inside you'd feel sorry for, and these girls out here you'd be very happy for. So there's with every life has a balancing effect.
Well, it feels like some sort of, I suppose having somewhere warm and snug for a few to go occasionally might be handy. But talking then a little bit more about that diversification and needing to do other things. So I guess again from the consumer's perspective, they're going to look at it. The clues in the name, the open air dairy. We see these happy cows. We can all kind of quite simply understand the benefits for the cows at least, and it's interesting to hear about the benefits for the team. So you're starting to create a brand, and you're starting to kind of look at having some products off the back of that. At the moment, that's just cheese. Can people buy your milk specifically, or is it just the cheese?
No, it's
consumer by people, obviously.
Yes, it's just cheese we're doing at the moment, mainly because our milk goes to a cheese factory, and they've been very kind enough to make our own cheese out of just our milk. So last night, for instance, I took the milk down at 11 o'clock last night and offloaded it. So today they're making a batch of our cheese.
Do they buy all of your milk?
So they buy all of our milk, yeah.
Okay.
So we produce about 3.2 million litres a year.
Okay.
I took 15,000 litres down to make a batch of cheese today, which will do probably 2 tons of cheese.
Wow, 2 tons. Okay.
Which is good, but I think we can probably produce on this farm sort of about 420 to 450 tons of cheese. So
if all of your milk went to cheese.
If all our milk went into cheese. So that's roughly what we produced. So we sold 6 tons of cheese last year, which sounds a lot, but actually in the grand scheme of things to our businesses,
it's not a lot. If you could
little.
Do 420 tons, I suppose.
Yes.
Is there a motivation? I presume cheese is a higher value product than milk, basically.
It is a higher value product, but there's a cash flow implication. Our cheese is matured between 12 and 15 months. So you don't get any money for that.
Yeah.
And with a young, naive business as we are, we need that money for our milk in to pay our suppliers, to pay our wages and that side of things. So
So you could keep moving a proportion though into, because I guess
Yes.
I'm thinking of the vineyards now. I was with Hattingly Wine interviewing them a couple of months ago, and it was interesting that there's a number of vineyards that provide the grapes. What they don't have is the wineries to actually convert the grapes into enough
Yes.
wine, and their problem in the supply chain is that there's almost more grapes and more wine than there is winemakers. Could you get the same thing in cheese? I suppose it sounds great if because you wouldn't start making your own cheese. You would always outsource that, would you? Well, I suppose never say never.
Well, the Barber family are one of the best in the world at making cheese. They've won awards.
And now vodka as well, I think, aren't they? Linked with Jason?
Yes.
Black Cow.
Yeah, Black Cow vodka. Yeah, Jason's a relation of the
That's right.
the guys.
He's been on the podcast as well.
So, if I was to start making cheese, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. So actually, if you've got someone that's probably the world's best at making cheese, or cheddar cheese, for instance, then actually a good partnership with them is actually we're giving them a really high quality milk to go into their cheese brands. And in turn, they're letting us make a little bit of cheese as well, to play with, locally. And, that's, we've got a lot of interest in what we're doing, and it's nice to see how that will evolve. It might go nowhere, it might go somewhere.
Yeah. It's like my dog, right? I've got a dog, Jasper, who does this, who's rubbing against my leg to get attention, but slightly trickier on a cow. So if you find yourself in a cow, where is it? It's their ears they like having.
Ears are under the chin, so just that little bit there between the ears.
Okay, he's in his happy bump. I'm thinking how to
She
describe that. There's like a little.
There's a lump, yeah.
Lump on the top of your head, stroke behind that, and then if you do find yourself stood by a Land Rover in a field with a cow rubbing you very enthusiastically, they've all just decided to leave the field. So where are they heading now? The next bit of grass?
There might be another bit of grass. I can't. Someone has probably come in and they think, well, I'll go
something's more interesting's going on.
Yeah,
that's probably an indication that we're getting to the end. Do you think they've listened and gone, right, I get the gist, he's making cheese, they should wrap up, which we will do very soon. I don't think we should be offended by the fact they've all just decided to stop listening. So I think you've answered this. Is your advice, I suppose, to anybody, certainly on a bigger scale. I guess what was interesting about your story is that you knew farming, you'd come from farming, they went through some sort of family challenges that left you in a place where you needed to nigh on start from scratch. It always looks from the outsider, it looks like this is an impossible kind of industry to get into, I suppose, agriculture. It just looks like you need loads of land and loads of cash. Is this kind of approach, do you think, going to lead to more people that could, if somebody had a craving, and I know there's that kind of cliched thing of, city boy moves out into the country and decides to have a pop at this, but is this a potential incubator to get people with less cash back into farming?
Yeah, I definitely. And we've talked to a lot of people who are trying to get into farming. There's been their passion to milk cows, and so they've talked to us about being new entrants into farming. The second parlour we've sold has gone to Suffolk, to a young couple, I think they're 21, 22.
Wow.
Who want to get in and start milking cows on an affordable situation. I guess because it's machinery, you can get a finance company to do it. You've actually got something tangible that can be taken back, or you can guarantee so you can get finance to do it. The biggest challenge we had was getting bank support. Banks will lend money against a farm if you own it. But if you haven't got any security, it's very hard to then borrow money from the bank, which is obviously my business partner, Neil, with his accountancy background. We struggled to get any borrowings at all when we started. I think we interviewed 4 banks of which one was going to get our business, and they all turned us down by the bank that we had our current account with. And so they supported us. But what we've done is we've set good business plans out. We've under-promised and overachieved, every sort of 6 months when we've had a review. And that has given them confidence. So, we started off talking to them in 2009. They were starting to give us lending by 2012 because actually we'd said and done what we were trying to do. We're growing value in the stock. And, they've supported us wholeheartedly now, and we've built that rapport up. So someone coming in, capital, I think, can be your biggest sort of challenge, but also it can be your least biggest challenge, and it's a mentality of, right, how can I do it? What other ways are there we can do? You can hire things. You don't have to buy everything. We leased the first 100 cows in 2011. We got in calf. We actually leased them to another farmer. That had never been done in this country, to my knowledge, before we did that. So actually leasing someone's cows is another way of doing it. So you pay as you go.
Right, amazing.
And these are the things we've had to do, thinking outside the box. It's, I guess, what we've been complimented on, a number of times. Actually, I remember, it sticks with me now. Adam Henson came out with Country Fowl a couple of years ago, and talking off camera, he said, well, we've had to think outside the box. And he said, what? Thinking outside the box? You said he ripped the box off and thrown it away.
Yeah.
And I guess we normalise 800 cows in a field being milked over a trailer. It's what I've done for the last 8 years. But still, professional farms that turn up yesterday to come and have a look round were blown away with what they saw. And it's become normal to us, but it still is very abnormal, really, to farmers themselves, let alone, the public.
Yeah, amazing.
And,
which is remarkable in that, I guess, I don't know if you go back, I don't know how far do you have to go back. How long have we been herding cows and making milk on a commercial level? Is it a couple hundred years? Is it?
Yes,
is it
I would have thought so, yeah.
And would it have been more like this, 100 odd years ago? Or was it just done on a much, I suppose it was just a much smaller
scale?
Just
smaller scale, everyone would have had a house cow.
Yeah, okay. Right. That's quite a lot smaller scale, yes. I suppose, isn't it?
Yes.
A house cow. I think if I go back with one, my wife might look at me a little bit oddly. Is that something that excites you, though, and interests you, is helping other people get into this sector without the same traditional history, I suppose, of what was needed in farming?
Definitely. This has been a learning experience for 8 years, and actually it's amazing how much we have learned, and you don't credit yourself with learning. And we've offered now, with the 2 parlours we've made, offered consultancy with that. Not that I feel qualified, but a farmer told me yesterday, as long as you're 50 miles away from home, you're a consultant.
Okay, yeah, perfect, yeah.
You know everything.
Yeah.
And we do know a lot about what we're doing here, and so if you can give advice, and I must say that we've been helped along the way by many different farmers and business people that have helped us free of charge. You ask a question and generally you get an answer, or someone will get back to you with an email. So when people are helping you, if we can then help others, and my phone numbers, my phone's switched on 24 hours a day, and generally I pick it up, and probably once a week a random farmer will phone up and ask a question or ask for a price or do whatever, and I do my best to answer and help people as I've been helped.
Amazing.
Too.
Okay, excellent. And because you actually make the kit, because you can't go somewhere, the stuff you're using in the field, you can't just rock up at John Deere or whoever and say, can I have one of those, please? These are bespoke made.
No, there's no one making anything. There's a few mobile parlours in Europe I've seen sort of in the skiing fields and that sort of stuff. During the summer, they'll take a milking bale out onto the mountains, which might milk 5 cows. And I think in Europe there are a few manufacturers of temporary milking parlours, but nothing to what we're doing here.
Patented your
No, we haven't
kit?
patented the design. It's, I went and measured someone else's milking parlour and stuck it on a trailer.
Yeah.
So I've done nothing particularly clever. You've also got to have, if someone did copy you, you've then got to have the financial clout to then take them to court to prove that. And we looked at patenting it and the cost of doing that, but we've always thought that it's better to help someone. So if someone says, I'd like to do that, well, actually, we can build you a parlour. We can tell you how to do it. We can help you. So let's help people to do what we're doing rather than actually put barriers up and say, well, you can't do it. And, a farmer in Zimbabwe phoned me up and asked me if I'd send plans over. And I said, well, actually, there's a little bit sensitive to sending the plans I've got, but actually I'll send you a few photos. And we've been on WhatsApp, and he's now built his own parlour in Zimbabwe and is doing what we are over there. And so you can help in some ways, albeit commercially I couldn't send the plans over there because it was probably deemed silly or to put your plans on the internet, as it were. But you still wanted to help, so we helped in how we could.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to farms in New Zealand, Canada, an Irish farmer who's farming in Germany. And it's almost part of daily life now, sort of fielding phone calls like that, and it's what I enjoy in the job, really.
Yeah, good. Well, that's exciting. Again, from a consumer's perspective, I think the more and more people who can adopt this, the better. Because, like you said when we arrived, being stood here, surrounded by 800 cows and 60 bulls, or 700 and something, could be intimidating. But they are very calm, very relaxed. It's a lovely space. So, congratulations on what you've built. If people want to buy the cheese, then, so they can't buy the milk, but they want to buy the cheese, where do they go for that? Do you sell it online, or is it only through local shops?
Well, no, we don't sell it online yet. Again, we're such a young business, so we've got a website. We are now on Instagram, albeit
you don't take that shot.
I'm not doing it because I don't even know how to work it, but we're getting a bit of help with that. So there are local shops in Bridport and Dorchester, and there's a few markets in Wimborne and Sturminster Newton, I think, that are selling it. But also we sell to two wholesalers, Longmans and Leopard Dairy, and they are spreading it across the south, as far as I know, so as far up as London.
Yeah, I think we use Longmans. So, yeah.
So in your deli or your supplier, just ask if Longmans or Leopard supply, and you should be able to get it into your deli if that's the case. And
same in the restaurant trade, then there's a potential wholesale route through. If
Roberts Food Services to Dorset, who we also supply them. So it's all keeping it local. And again, I'm a farmer who's now suddenly learning how to sell cheese, which is
how to retail. Yeah,
and I've got no training in that either. So so it's fun, and
I don't think that will stop you, because you didn't know how to run an open air dairy 8 years ago, did you? And now here you are.
Well, so every day's a school day.
Absolutely.
I think my father said, when you know it all, it's time to retire.
Yeah.
And,
it never
so
happens.
Keep learning every day and do something different.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the website address? I see. I was going to ask you for the Instagram, and I knew you wouldn't know that. But
well, it's all. If you Google open air dairy, we generally come up as the first.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'll when I put the podcast up, I'll put the website in the show notes as well. So great. Well, look, thank you for sparing the time. I think it's fascinating, and good luck. I'll come back and see you in a few years' time. I reckon you're going to have a range of milks and drinks and cheeses and all sorts going on. But good luck.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So there you have it. You have reached the end of another episode of the Humans of Hospitality podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please go and visit our website, humansofhospitality.co.uk, for the show notes and extra episodes and information. And whilst you're there, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and to receive free materials all about the humans behind our incredible industry. Lastly, if you could subscribe, rate and review this podcast, you will be massively helping me out, and it would be hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll be launching another podcast in just 7 days' time. Cheers.